Hey, I'm Zach.
And I'm Jesse.
You're watching Disruptive Investing. So, hey, disruptive investors, if you believe the disruption coming is just electric vehicles, then you're not seeing the whole picture.
Let's cover some interesting EV news this week, and then at the end, we'll tie it all together and tell you what many of you are missing. So the news in from Stellantis last week, they just inked a deal with Novonix, the synthetic graphite company.
They're locking in at least 86,250 tons, with their eyes set on maybe hitting 115,000 tons.
This deal starts in 2026 and keeps rolling through 2031.
And remember last year, Stellantis was like, hey, we're building this massive 34 gigawatt hour battery factory in the US with Samsung SDI.
Yeah, that's going up in Kokomo, Indiana, and it's not their first rodeo in the States either.
But wait, there's more. So just last month, they teamed up with LG Energy Solutions, the South Korean battery gurus, to crank out battery modules in Canada. So this new factory in Windsor, Ontario is going to be huge, pumping out 49.5 gigawatt hours of juice, which could power up to 450,000 EVs.
That's a lot of future road trips right there.
What I think this story tells us is what's between the lines.
Okay.
So first, where is Novonix producing this synthetic graphite?
Let's see, their Riverside facility in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Oh, I see. So the location of where they produce this material matters, because if it's produced by a free trade partner or in the United States, then it qualifies for the federal EV tax incentives. So this graphite, which makes up to 25 to 28% of an EV battery, would qualify.
Correct. Second, if Stellantis is buying synthetic graphite, which is what Novonix makes, which costs more than naturally mined and processed graphite, well, why would they do that?
Because there isn't that much graphite being mined and processed in North America.
And we're going to talk about how investors can use this information in our Investor Club bonus stories this week. So just join us on Patreon. We have a link below. Help support independent journalism. You get all the cool perks that our club members get. So next up, we've got some Ford news from Germany.
So Ford has been like, whoa, not as many people want our electric cars in Germany as we thought. So they're hitting the brakes a bit over at their Cologne Electric Vehicle Center, which produces their Electric Explorer and Capri.
Yeah, an internal memo circulating in Ford, allegedly seen by a local newspaper, stated, we're producing more than we can sell. So Ford's calling it a temporary adjustment, but what it really means is that they're scaling back production.
Ford's now playing the German work card, applying for this thing called short-time work. Basically, they're saying, hey, let's send some of our crew home for a bit, not because they're out, but because we need to chill on the EV production.
So under this deal, the workers won't get the boot, but they'll be hanging at home, getting a government paycheck to help keep them going. Germany's Federal Employment Agency steps in to help pay their wages. So basically, Ford is relying on the German government to keep their employees kind of in limbo. I think they'll eventually be fired. Battery electric vehicle sales have continued to fall ever since the German government abruptly ended their EV subsidy program back in December of 2023. Sales data from this October shows that sales of BEVs dropped 5%. BEVs in October accounted for 15% of new car registrations, which is lower than it had been. But that's because Germany basically decided to put the brakes on the EV subsidy. So the Chinese automaker BYD, Build Your Dreams, has announced that they will be entering the South Korean car market in 2025.
I thought BYD was already in South Korea.
They did enter the market in 2016 with commercial vehicles like, forklifts, buses, and trucks. But next year, they will start selling BYD passenger cars. BYD is bringing not one, but two of their models. So the Atto 3, which is this compact SUV, and the Seal, which is a mid-size EV sedan. They've already got the green light for the Atto 3 from the Korean Environmental Ministry, but they're still in line for the Seal certification. BYD will be competing with the Tesla Model 3 and the Hyundai Ioniq 6. This Tesla sales in South Korea chart shows sales by year and quarter.
Okay, so it looks like Tesla is on a tear in Korea. They sold over 16,000 cars there last year, and it looks to be on track to crush that this year. Tesla sold more in just the first 2 quarters than all of last year.
Yeah, it's going to be a really good year. So just to get some idea here, the BYD Atto 3 is priced at about $30,900 starting price. The BYD Seal starts at $32,500, with the highest level trim priced at $45,000.
Okay, and how about the Tesla Model 3 in South Korea?
The rear-wheel drive starts at $38,500, and the long-range all-wheel drive starts at $44,500.
Okay, so the BYD models are cheaper.
Yes, but from what I'm hearing, Chinese auto brands don't get much love in Korea due to quality and safety issues. They're just seen as kind of crappy.
Now, maybe BYD will change that. We'll have to see.
Okay, so these stories we just covered are what I would call kind of typical big auto stories, stuff that we cover many times before here on Disruptive Investing channel, and of course on our weekly news show, Tesla Time News, over on the Now You Know channel. Make sure you head over there and subscribe as well. But if I can add an analogy for what we're about to go through. So remember when the world of telephones was only landlines? So if you're around in the 70s and 80s, then you remember that the only way to place a phone call was on one of these. We didn't get the first US cellular service until 1983, and believe me, it was not common. It wasn't until the late 1990s that people started actually using cell phones.
Okay, so why are we talking about cell phones?
Because if you had been an investor in, say, the 1990s, when it was apparent that cell phone technology was able to handle millions of customers, and customers had caught on and were enjoying this new technology, what would you have been focused on?
I guess investing in companies who were expanding their cellular networks and signing up new customers.
Would you have been buying stock in Apple?
No.
Right. Why would you have been in the 1990s? Apple's didn't make a cell phone or have any cellular customers. But as a long-term disruptive investor, it would have been a great play. If you had invested $10,000 in Apple in 1995, guess what it would have been worth today, 29 years later?
I don't know, like $1 million?
How about $847 million?
What?
Yeah, take a look at the chart.
Wait, so just $10,000, 10,000 in 1995, not 10 million, 10,000, and then I would almost be a billionaire today?
Yes.
Okay, but I got two problems with your scenario.
Okay.
I would have had no idea that Apple was going to make the world's first and most popular smartphone a decade later.
Mm-hmm.
And number two, who wants to be that long-term an investor? I mean, 29 years is a long time.
Well, I think I can kind of solve both of those problems for you.
Okay.
But first, disclaimer, we are not financial advisors. Do not take our advice as financial advice. Do your own research. That said, through all the research that we do covering Tesla every week for the past 9 years on Tesla Time News, and because we own and test tons of electric vehicles, first principle thinking, right? Including owning Tesla Model Ys, Model 3s, Model Xs, Cybertrucks. We own the Rivian R1T, the Ford F-150. We've owned the BMW i3, et cetera, et cetera. Let's just say that this is our bread and butter. We have a good idea of what is about to happen. And if we're right, and cars are about to achieve full autonomy, and Tesla is going to lead this industry, not to mention their energy divisions and Optimus humanoid robots divisions, just Tesla robotaxis should launch Tesla into another stratosphere of valuation. And so that answers your first point. Going back to 1995, it's as if someone told you what Apple was going to do. And to your second point, instead of having to wait over a decade for Apple to make their first smartphone, Tesla is just about to achieve full self-driving, in our opinion. So the wait time for exciting returns will likely not be 29 years. Again, disclaimer, we are not financial advisors, but that's why we're so excited about the future here on Disruptive Investing, because we're in the midst of this disruption. And unless you dial in your focus and you put in the work and you truly understand what's going on, you'll miss it. And you don't want to miss a move like that, do you?
So, I mean, I think it's important to talk about here when we were talking about cell phones in the 1990s, those were things with buttons and a little hole that you'd talk into and a little hole that people would talk into your ear and you'd say, hello, can you hear me now? Good. That was the most a cell phone could do, really.
We didn't even really text yet.
Right. We didn't fully understand what smartphones were going to be. And so when people were talking about cell phones, we were talking about AT&T and we were talking about, Motorola.
Well, and that's what I want you guys to understand. You probably understand EVs and you think that's the disruption. And it is. You're not wrong.
It's part of the disruption.
It's like thinking that cell phones were the disruption. And you're right. They were. But the bigger piece of that is that the smartphone. So it was riding on the cellular technology. You had to have that infrastructure, but on top of it was this new rectangle that no one was thinking about.
This is a cell phone, but I don't use it for calling most of the time.
You use it for banking and for social media and for finding out the weather and for basically your whole life, right?
Right.
Now, let's go to the real important part of the disruption in EVs is autonomy. And so you don't understand it if you're only talking about the EV part. If you're like, the Chevy Bolt is the full disruptive part. It's like, no, it's not.
Right.
It is a necessary part of it, but the bigger part of it is autonomy.
And that's the part that we think that everybody's missing. And so, just like people were investing in AT&T and Motorola back in the 90s, they completely missed that they should have been investing in Apple. Why should they have invested in Apple? Well, Apple was into computers. They were at the leading edge of technology. And Not only were they good at computers, they were good at shrinking computers to fit in your pocket, which was something that people thought, well, you just, you'd have basically a calculator in your pocket. You'd only have a big kind of clunky phone.
You were not thinking about app revenue back then, right?
No.
But now Apple gets 30% of all app revenue. You weren't thinking about music. Why would a phone have anything to do with music? But now Apple and others have a huge chunk of the music market.
And back in the day, you would have gone, well, I can see how Apple is starting to come out with the iPod. That's an interesting development. It's a little thing that goes in your pocket. It's a little computer that goes in your pocket, but I don't understand what this has to do with cell phones. Well, if you take an iPod and you turn it into an iPhone, take all the functionality of the iPod with music and video, and you add it to a phone where now you have the communication aspect, that created the smartphone. The same thing is true with autonomous vehicles. You take an EV, which is great. It saves you a whole bunch of money if you own an EV because you don't have to pay for fuel. There's less maintenance, all of those benefits. You put autonomy on top of that, and all of a sudden it becomes something entirely different and entirely disruptive.
And if you think that my example of, 29 years ago, putting $10,000 into Apple is kind of a joke and it couldn't be true. Well, Jeff Bezos actually did this in 1995. As his company was starting to take off, he got his relatives to put $10,000 each into his company. And they must have thought, Jeff, you're a little crazy, but okay, we'll do it. Guess what they're worth today? Billions of dollars each, just from that one investment that took place 29 years ago. So it can happen, and it does happen, but you have to see really far into the future about how's this guy who's making a website that sells books going to be worth trillions of dollars? How is this company that is just selling like weird computers going to be worth trillions of dollars? And the same thing here. How is Tesla, this company making EVs, going to be worth trillions of dollars? That's what we talk about here on Disruptive Investing and also on our Investor Club over on Patreon. So we hope you found this enjoyable. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time on Disruptive Investing.